Without a shadow of a doubt, it's the Crockett Show in social media history. I want to welcome you to another episode of the War Zone. I got my man in the building, Donovan Sadiq. The Queen, Demetri K, got the knife off. But I am the five-star general. You want to pass the George Floyd Act. You want the police to act right. You don't want them shooters and killers. Well, until you get the white supremacists out the police force, it ain't gonna matter. They gonna stay on a rampage. Say, we're gonna talk about it tonight with our guest, Noel Pinnock. Let's get to it, man. Say, man, I want to welcome y'all to another episode of the War Zone and tell you thank you for tuning in. Because, you know, without you guys, we wouldn't have a show. So we realistically appreciate you taking the time out to come and hang out with us. Demetri K is off tonight, and we're going to have an all-male discussion with our guest, Noel Pinnock. And I saw today that the news for me is I got a chance to peek in and watch the Chauvin jury selection. I didn't fly today, so I'm looking at them disqualified Latinos. Oh, they trying to tailor make that jury, man. They trying to tailor make that jury, man. But I'm gonna tell you something. I'm gonna give you fair warning, and I ain't got nothing to do with that. I'm just a messenger. If y'all don't convict that man, they gonna burn that motherfucker to the ground. I don't care how many National Guards you send down there. Them people is not playing in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Donovan, what's up, my friend?
Hey. Welcome you guys to the Tuesday edition of the War Zone. We're going to continue our discussion from last night. You know, this is kind of a part of it. You wouldn't really have to worry about bail reform if we had decent policemen working on these police forces. And I'm not saying every policeman, everybody that aspires to be a police is a bad person, because I was in the military. That didn't make me a bad person. However, until some of these good cops start turning into these bad cops and we get rid of the white supremacy, we're going to have a continued bail problem and innocent people being put into jail. Exactly. It's Noel showing out there. And I want to give a big shout out to Noel Pinnock for taking the time to come talk with us. And again, to you guys, our friends out there that sit with us every night, Monday through Friday, and even on special announcements. Thank you guys for tuning in. And like I said, the black media is where we're going to do this coverage, and you're not going to get this on the national media. So again, welcome, Mr. Pinnock, and Jerry, you go ahead and take it from here.
Well, I want to say this before we get into it. Somebody called Dr. Grenita Lathan and tell her we ain't letting you get out of town till we shut the city down for you. We're working on something. For those that didn't like it was cool, but she belonged to us anyway. So we're going to throw you the biggest going away party you ever seen in your life. I keep saying that the George Floyd legislation, to me, has no teeth. Whether it's on the state level or the federal level, I feel it does not have any teeth to the situation. I mean, it sounds good. They're talking a good thing. But then when you start to think about it, it's hard to convict a cop anyway with qualified immunity. But okay, let's retrain them. How do you retrain a white supremacist? What type of training you do for that? We saw with the riots at the Capitol, slowly but surely, more cops, present day cops, retired cops were involved in that riot on Capitol Hill. Okay, hold on a second, man. Well, if we retrain them, it don't matter. You got to get the white supremacists out of the police force. That's all it boils down to. And I think it needs to be a purge, Donovan and Noel, to where if they can identify them, get them out of there ASAP. We don't need you no more. I want to welcome our guest, Noel Pinnock. Introduce yourself, my friend. Welcome to the family.
Five-star General Donovan. Thank you so much for having me on the call today. I couldn't think of a more important topic on a Tuesday. Toss it up Tuesday to really have some meaningful dialogue on how we can improve what I have coined the entry door
Noel,
to
you
America's
using
justice.
a microphone or something?
I'm muted. I'm muted.
I am. Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Say something, Noel.
All right. So
There you go.
yes, sir. Microphone check. Microphone check. All right. Very good. Thank you, General Donovan, the recovering Democrat, for having me on the call. I couldn't think of a better way to spend what I call Toss It Up Tuesday on a topic that is near and dear to everybody across this country. It's something that I've coined, in my opinion. Police officers are oftentimes the door to America's justice system. They're the entry point for not only adults, but also our young people. And we also know, and all too well, that the prison pipeline is real. The cradle to career pipeline is real. But the realness of that cradle to career pipeline is predicated on how individuals interact with police officers. Now, you said something about training. You said something about qualified immunity. But let me tell you something, guys. There are 3 ways to change somebody's personality. Here are the 3 ways. I don't have a drum roll, but I'll do the first one. The first way is deep psychotherapy. That's a lobotomy. The second way is deep religious conversion. That's Benny Hinn holding his hand up and you falling on the ground. The third way is a brain transplant. Now, when you have an individual that have ideologies that have been locked into their psyche, you can't untrain that. You can't put that upon guardrails. But what you can do is that you can address that. Let me tell you what privilege is. Privilege is when you think something is not a problem because it's not a problem to you personally. And to me, when we think about House Resolution 7120, the George Floyd Justice and Police Reform Act, I'm saying it's great that we can have requirements for police officers to have de-escalation training. It's powerful that they ban chokeholds and other killology techniques that we'll talk about throughout the course of this show today, or altering qualified immunity. But my mama told me, if you put paint on a dirty wall, it don't make the wall clean. My mama told me that you have to clean your house in order for it to get in order. And you have a dichotomy in police departments today. You got those who are on the extremist side, and you got those who are not. And what we have to do is be diligent about really seeking what are the root causes to our issues and what are the solutions that are going to take us to this point. And let me read something to you. I'm sure that you guys were watching the insurrection hearings, right? And the insurrection hearings ran all last week, and they were talking about the Capitol insurrectionists and how police officers were engaged and involved on the white supremacist side. And many people looked at the screen in astonishment. Oh, wow, we got white supremacists in law enforcement? Yeah, we do. In fact, let me read this verbatim, because what we're going to talk about, it's not of my opinion. Everything I'm talking about has been researched by other people and confirmed. Dianne Feinstein, a U.S. Senator out of California, said this: I want to ask about the threat of domestic terrorism by white supremacists. It isn't new, but it has gained a lot of attention in the intelligence circle in recent years. And it's the biggest domestic terrorist threat. Last year, in 2020, FBI Director Christopher Wray testified before the House Homeland Security Committee that the most lethal of all domestic extremists since 2001, do the math, that's 20 years, right, have been racially and ethnically motivated. Similarly, the former acting Department of Homeland Security Director testified before the Senate that, quote, white extremists from a lethality standpoint over the last few years, particularly in 2018 and 2019, are the most persistent lethal threat when we talk about domestic terrorism. That's right in our hotbed seat right now in our police departments across the country. Right now in our police departments across the country, we have white supremacists that are wearing badges. And I'll tell you this, I believe that our police officers, and I will always say that we support good cops, not bad cops, that our police officers are engaged in highly difficult and complex situations. But we do not need modern day Rambos with a white supremacist agenda patrolling our streets with the lights and ready to kill. And what we're calling on is really becoming vulnerable to say, where are these issues are, where these issues exist, and what can we do to address it? In fact, our nation's capital, if you think about it, has installed barbed wire fence all around the nation capital. I've been to the West Wing. I mean, I walked clearly through the executive office building down to the West Wing and walked all the way through. And guess what? There were very few barriers. But when you go to the nation's capital today, they're fenced, barbed wired, and they got National Guards patrolling the entire area. Well, in our communities, we cannot erect a wall with barbed wire fence to protect us from police officers that have a white supremacist agenda and those ideologies that are impacting the way we have community-oriented policing. And it's no longer can we sit around at the table and not discuss the elephant that's in the room. And what I know about the George Floyd Act, I love what they've done with it. In fact, if you go back to House Resolution 4198, which was the End Racial and Profiling Act of 2017, and Senate Bill 411, which is the End Racial Act, as well as religion profiling, both of those pieces of legislation died in this Judiciary Committee. Let me tell you why it died. And this is just my opinion. It died because it had ties to compliance, and compliance has ties to funding. Now, I'm not all for defunding police, but I am for right funding the police. I am to say that if we have white supremacists in our organization and we have done nothing to cure the problem, that everything that we are painting around the house doesn't put the house in order. So I'll toss it back to you guys to see what, before I jump on some of the other topics.
Well, I remember that. I think it was with Clinton, with President Clinton, where a lot of this stuff got initiated, where, if you didn't do what you needed to do on the racial profiling side, that they would decrease your funding. And I really feel that that's the route that we need to go. If it's been proven that white supremacists are part of local police departments, then I would look at my local officials and say, well, what's the problem with fixing it? If you have a problem in the neighborhood, you want to purge us. So why not purge the white supremacists? I keep telling people that folks make money off the demise of poor people. They make money off the demise of poor people. And I'm going to tell you, man, in certain neighborhoods, we don't care if they white supremacists or not. We ain't putting up with it. We ain't putting up with it. Get these folk up out our neighborhoods at night, man. Because a lot of this stuff that's happening, which George was an exception, normally happens at night. Because you got the patty rollers, rolling the neighborhood at night, handling you like you a punk. I've never seen so many cops. I remember I got pulled over one day. Dude tell me I ain't have a front license plate. Motherfucker, how you can see it when I was coming behind you? You wasn't looking at my front license plate. You profiled me. I'm a black man in a nice car, and you pulled me over. You done pulled the wrong Negro over today. Well, man, can you calm down? Fuck no. I'm not calming down. You ain't had no reason to pull me over. But my license plate right here in my window, and the only reason it's in my window is because I don't have nowhere to put it on the front of the car. So could you do something else today? Like go out and catch some murderers, some rapists or something? Rather than sitting around trying to pull me over for a license plate? See, I don't play with them when they pull me over. I'm not playing the game. So I probably, I might end up dead somewhere because I just don't like them. And there's no way to identify these people. You don't know who the good cops is. You don't know who the bad cops is. But I know we got good cops because I done worked with a bunch of them. On the school level, the city level, the county level, good guys. But some of these, you can see it in their eye, man. Donovan?
Oh, absolutely. I just have a couple of questions. It was funny. I was doing errands today, and my mom calls me, and she says, she goes, Donovan, I just looked up, we're here in California and stuff, where my mom's in Louisiana. And, she said, I just looked up Maxine Waters' record. Now, we've been saying this for years. Look up these Black politicians' records, and you will see that they do absolutely nothing. They name post offices and they give civil rights medals and name streets after civil rights leaders. And that's pretty much it. So she looks on this lady's record. As we know, Aunt Maxine has been in office for over 30 years. There's a whole bunch of them that have been there for over 30 years. There was a big wave of Black candidates in Congress people in the early 1990s. And she says, well, I looked on her page and there's nothing there. I said, well, Mom, name me right now off the top of your head any Black legislation of significance that you could name. She couldn't name one. So she's starting to, wake up and see what a lot of us are talking about in regards to politics and what's happening. But my question is this: here in California, I think about 2 weeks ago, we just found out, not that we didn't know, but the LA sheriff has a Mexican gang problem. And as we know, a lot of white supremacy is using Hispanics as a proxy to shoot down Black people and stuff, to take it off of them. White supremacy does not mind being in the minority as long as they have proxy people they can use to uphold white supremacy. So now you've got these gang members in the sheriff's department, and yet you have policemen that have come out on record and said, yes, there is a gang problem, there is a gang culture. Now, the new president, Joe Biden, has said he doesn't want to end qualified immunity. Matter of fact, he wants to give the police more money for incompetence. So knowing that this is one of the agendas that the President Obama wants, or not Obama, the President Biden wants, what's the difference? Wants to do, which means the rest of the boule politicians and the Black politicians are going to follow right along with it. What is your take on that? And, and how do we do that? Because, just like we said, you can throw as much money as you want at it, but that's not going to solve the problem of getting these bad cops out of office.
That's a good question and good point, Donovan, because one of the things that I do know, going back to the analogy of getting your house in order, none of this stuff is going to make any sense, right? When you think about qualified immunity and you hear about that, many people don't even know that what qualified immunity is. And so there's a high degree of undereducated individuals on the outside of this legislation that's still crawling, trying to figure out what that is. And so when you do the research on qualified immunity, it basically predicates that officers are intentionally insulating themselves from guaranteed criminal liability through fear-based training. Let me tell you what that means. That means that when I hurt someone beyond their constitutional rights, and this is the law in terms of qualified immunity, then I'm justified in my action because I felt like I was in fear for my life. Right? Now, check this. How does that fear-based mentality form? Well, because many officers across this country have been trained by Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman, who is the inventor of warrior-based training or killology training, which essentially says that the officer's safety is prioritized over that of the people that they encounter. Now, think about the history of all of these egregious acts against Black and brown individuals, right? Typically, the most dangerous encounter a police officer will have is not at a domestic call, is at a traffic stop. George Floyd is a basic example. And what I've said about the traffic stop is that there's a police officer has 7 seconds to make a decision and will use 7 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger. Just look at Philandro in terms of that 7 seconds to make a decision. And if you're already profiling, you already have these ideologies, you've been trained in warrior training, fear-based training. Now I'm prioritizing my safety over yours. Now you're a threat. And when you are a threat, in my analogy, if I'm a hammer, everybody looks like a nail. So qualified immunity kicks in because I feared for my life. What about the life of the victim? The life of the victim's family? Did you know in Northern California, there's a brother by the name of Angelo Quinton that was in his home with his family and had a mental health crisis. He's a 30-year-old Navy veteran. The police officers came who were dispatched to the scene. To make a long story short, this young man had a knee in his neck for over 5 minutes, screaming in his abode, his casa, "I can't breathe." The gentleman lost consciousness, and the video shows the mother coming in saying, "What's wrong with my baby? What's wrong with my baby? What's wrong with my baby?" The same killology technique where you maneuver your knee on the neck of a suspect because you're trying to subdue the suspect because you, again, mentality, I believe you're a threat, so I have to subdue the threat by any means necessary. Angelo died, but we don't hear anything about that across the media because they're using the same technique. Let me tell you what happened in Minneapolis. In Minneapolis, police department, over half of their police department employees, those officers, were trained in killology training, warrior-based, fear-based training. And in a span of a year or so, they used the knee on the neck subdue technique on 237 suspects. Of the 237 suspects that they used this technique to subdue the suspects, over 16% of them lost consciousness. Meaning that, you know, back in the day in the hood, we'll say we're going to choke you out because we're trying to subdue you. Because if I subdue you, then I've controlled the threat because now I've prioritized my safety over that of yours.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question.
Got it.
So should Chauvin be on trial based on the fact this is what they trained him to do?
You know, the mayor of Minneapolis has come out and said that he has vehemently opposed the training and they put a stop to the training. But unfortunately, Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman still offers his course books and his training outside of what would be paid by taxpayers' dollars. Now, they do prohibit, super officers from taking it, but they can't stop it, right?
Well, isn't there, and I know in the 90s or whatever it was when the chokehold was breaking brothers in half and stuff, and there was a universal ban on that, but yet you still find police departments still using the chokehold. And then in the number that you quoted in regards to the 16% of the people that actually went unconscious, how many women are subjected to that procedure?
You know, my data hadn't delved too deep into that. But in terms of those who may have been on the administrating side or the ones who have been doing I'm not sure. But it would be very telling to find out how many women have been. But, they will stop at no tactic. Remember, aside from the chokehold, police officers were armed or equipped with tasers. What do tasers do? Tasers are purposed to subdue the threat without in a non-lethal way, depending upon if the person doesn't have any type of pre-existing condition, which one will not know because police officers aren't physicians. Remember, we support good cops, not bad cops. So if you equip, let's just say an individual with a taser, and I saw in the media here recently, there was a 70-year-old lady in a wheelchair, and she got pulled out of the wheelchair and tased because she was resisting arrest. So guess what? If I move away, shrug my shoulders, say no to you, then I'm resisting arrest. See, I'm the president and CEO of Texas Cops and Communities, and we've been around for over 20 years, Donovan, building relationships in community to close the gap between cops and civilians, as well as to eradicate police systemic racism and retaliation in law enforcement. We've been doing this for 20 years. We were Governor's Rick Perry flagship program for bringing young people and cops together when no one was doing it, right? They had the DARE program. Are you familiar with DARE? the drug, those programs came in, but we've been doing this for 20 years. And so I tell folks, I'm steeped in this work, right? And it's something that is not only important, but I think it's life-saving. Senate Bill 30 in the state of Texas, the Community Safety Education Act, was passed by Senators Royce West and John Whitmire. In every press conference that I've attended where there's been a show of police brutality or lethality, I always quote that because, again, the most dangerous encounter a police will have with a civilian is at a traffic stop. So why not train civilians on what they should do when that license plate is in the windshield and a cop pulls you over for a violation that you have no idea? These steps are very clear. It's called a 7-step violator program, where it starts with identifying who you are. See, most of the times, again, in warrior-based training and mentality, remember, you can't change nobody's personality on through brain transplant. If I fear for my life and I prioritize my safety over yours, then I don't even introduce myself, which where the breakdown occurs ultimately every time. Because when you got pulled over, Jerry, did they say, hey, my name is Donovan, I'm with, California PD, I pulled you over because? Or did they say license and registration? Right? So, we have to be careful about how we characterize these things, because there are some good cops out there that are doing that. In fact, in Los Angeles, there is a motorcycle police officer that has written the most citations in California. He's a heavyset guy. I can't remember his name. He's on one of my videos. But he has the most commendations out of all of the police officers in LAPD Highway Patrol riding the motorcycle. And when they interview the motorist that he pulls over, they tell the people that this man and he's a black guy. This guy treats me with respect. He pulled me over for a ticket, and I didn't even feel like I was getting a ticket. I felt like I was having a conversation. See, that's what good policing's supposed to be. That's what community-oriented policing, regardless of. I just had one of my local police officers tell me recently, I'm talking about recently, that she pulled over a motorist for a violation. The motorist had to be between the ages of about 40, 45, and the man lost his bowels. He urinated on himself. And she said, "Why? I am so sorry. What did I do?" And the man said, I'm afraid. I am in fear for my life. Let me tell you what Mayor Frey said from Minneapolis, the mayor of Minneapolis. He said, fear-based training violates the values at the very heart of community policing. When you're conditioned to believe that every person encounter poses a threat to your existence, you simply cannot be expected to build a meaningful relationship with those same people. So guess what? If the taser doesn't do it, the knee in the neck doesn't do it, they use ketamine. Do you know what ketamine is? Mm-hmm. Ketamine is a general anesthetic that was developed in 1962. It was used on both humans and animals to subdue them. Police officers and paramedics, in some instances, when there is a violent suspect or a suspect that needs to have some restraint, will work together to inject individuals with ketamine. Now, you know all together well the story about ketamine with Elijah McClain, who was intubated after being injected multiple times with ketamine. So for the people who are concerned about vernacular, I'm very, Jared and Donald, I'm very meticulous when it comes to these words. And I'm going to tell you why. I don't want to speak from my frame of mind. I want to speak from the angle where we use data, because in God we trust, all else show data, in research. And the research speaks volume as to what these individuals are doing and what they have been doing over the years. And it's by time that we do it. So check this out. Ketamine, 1962. Minneapolis officers, the Office of Police Conduct reviewed showed that the appearance of ketamine police reports increased by 2 cases. This is in Minneapolis. We're talking about the trial of the history of American history. in terms of how do we balance what true community-oriented policing is and what it's not. The Minneapolis Office of Police Conduct Review showed the appearance of ketamine in police reports in terms of it being used increased from 2 cases in 2010 to 62 in 2017. That's an increase by 3,000%. So again, going back to the word-based mentality, you can't change the person's personality only through brain transplant. And if I put my life over your life, then guess what? I'm going to use it. Police officers using it as a de-escalation tactic claim delirium because they justify the administering of ketamine. They can't do it, but the paramedics can. But there are so many situations where paramedics and police get into it because the paramedic says, well, I don't want to induce this guy, because in the case with Elijah McClain, they didn't know he had a pre-existing condition. So why would you give someone an anesthetic and you're not an anesthesiologist simply because you want to subdue them? You want to contain the situation. Now, again, my message is going to be the same. We support good cops, not bad cops.
Right.
And well, so at the core of this work is what it is. Go ahead.
So let me ask you this. Okay,
sure.
We've got the data. We know some of the problems that is going on. Let me ask you this: as far as you have the civil rights generation that keeps saying, well, if we're not at the table, they gonna eat you, whatever that bullshit is, right? What's the point of being at the table if you're not doing anything? So my question to you is, with the knowledge and information that you have, how many Black politicians are getting behind you to support a bill to change the culture within these police departments?
You said the $10 million word, my brother. Culture. It's about changing culture, because let me tell you, culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And as we define culture as a set of belief and values and vision that people work in harmony to exemplify every day, that's what drives success every day. And I'm going to be completely honest. That's why we're taking it to the streets, because I believe there's a leader inside of all of us. And and certainly Texas cops and communities have reached out to our local and state lawmakers, and we're encouraging them to stand behind this petition. And this petition that we're pushing is to change the culture of policing forever.
Well,
and that
do
means,
me a favor, Noel. I want you to go on in the comments, and I want you to put the link to the petition. I need all y'all to look at the petition. What we talking about tonight, I've already signed it, and I need you guys to sign that petition. And thank y'all for the ones that have donated so far. Tonight is $2 Tuesdays. We got to get to that school board. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but put that link up. Well, I want to go to the hood for a second.
No, I'm about to do it.
I know that the traffic stops go left because a lot of these cops are so disrespectful when they pull you over. It's unreal. You get the talk and fly and all that, and a lot of these cats ain't having it, man. They just not having it, bro. I think there needs to be additional training as far as how you handle people when you pull them over. Now, I know that's something they go over in their academy, but a lot of these cops are just some disrespectful motherfuckers, man. Donovan?
I was just going to write in the post there, why can't we go back to a more like Andy Griffith type policing? And what I mean by that is, in the show, the Andy Griffith show, he never had to carry a gun because people respected the badge, basically.
We ain't living in Mayberry, we're living in Chirac.
Right. But what I'm saying is, though, if he's got to take care of business, Andy would always go get the shotgun because he was going to go and get the moonshiners, whatever he was going to go do, right? And that's what I'm saying. We get these people who don't live in our communities. They come in a warlike situation. Like you said, the training that they get is adversarial, based on military warrior training. And that's how they see the people that they police. And here in California, there's been some incentive to have policemen live in the neighborhoods they patrol. Guess how well that went? Absolute zero. So, we need to get back, I think, to a police-based training to where the people that live in our community, it's like you, OG. If I saw you, and I have a lot of respect for you, and you've been in the neighborhood all of your life, and you're the one that's policing my community, you don't necessarily need to wear your gun, because I know what you say is what you mean. We need to get back to that type of situation to where it de-escalates the situation, and let them go patrol their neighborhood and be afraid in their neighborhood. And then I'm very sure the numbers would be different than what they are today.
If I can, Donovan, let me just jump in. Do you know that 45 made a comment in 2017 when he was delivering this speech to a group of Long Island police officers in New York? Now, I'm from Brooklyn, right? We never went to Long Island.
Boogie down.
Brooklyn, baby. But let me tell you this. When when 45 said this, when you guys put somebody in the car and you're protecting their head, the way you put their hands over their head, like don't hit their head. They just kill somebody. Don't hit their head, I said. You can take the hand away, okay? That was 45's message to police officers. In fact, Freddie Gray, a Baltimore African-American, died after his head was violently struck with a bolt inside the police transport van. So when you talk about House Resolution 71, I applaud them, because you know what? To me, that's not a ceremonial act. I think those are critical ingredients to the culture pot. And see, Donovan and Jerry, the culture pot is not a melting pot, which means we just put everything in the pot and everything becomes one. No, the culture pot is a salad bowl. And what I mean by that is you bring all of these different ingredients, but it doesn't mean that it all becomes one, because tomatoes not like onions, onions not like lettuce, lettuce not like chicken, chicken is not like olives. All of it is part of this one bowl. And when that one bowl comes together, you still call it a salad. So I can bring officers from a diverse and divergent backgrounds together. But when I instill in them the culture that, number one, and let me tell you what we're talking about in the petition for those who will take time to read it, but those who may not. One, what we're asking is that we take swift and deliberate actions that will prohibit white supremacists from joining law enforcement, similarly to what the military is already doing, guys, as well as prevent law enforcement agencies from retaliating against cops who report police misconduct, as it was in the case with Houston police officer Catherine Swilley and former Chicago police officer Carol Horn, who lost all her teeth because of what we call duty to intervene and was reporting on police. So we're talking about swift to prohibit that. Number two, create a national database. We're talking about create a national database. Are you familiar with Uniform Crime Reporting Database? The UCR?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the UCR was developed so that they can provide accurate reporting as to who the encounters are within your police department, whether it's a traffic stop, domestic call, or a call out to the park. It doesn't matter. The uniform crime reporting is tied to their funding in terms of, and when we say funding, people don't realize that funding we're talking about is grant funding. We're not talking about taking away locals, ad valorem taxes and sales tax revenue that make up the composite of a municipality. We're talking about when police departments go out and they apply for Department of Justice grants under the program called Community Orienting Policing Services. All right, COPS. And that, they get a lot of money. We're not talking about $1,000, guys. We're talking about sometimes $10 million. All right. So we're saying create a national database. So just very similar to that uniform crime reporting. FBI, I'm going to tell you something. Have you guys heard about the use of force database? Mm-hmm. Well, use of force came out through FBI. Well, guess what? Nobody's using it. Well, let me just say this. 40% of the police departments are using it. You know why? because it has no tie to their funding, their grant funding. So unlike you see uniform crime reporting data versus the use of force database, you got a dichotomy there, right? But what we're saying is create and maintain a national database of police officers who have been identified and purged as white supremacists, those with ties to neo-Nazi, skinheads, Ku Klux Klan, or any, listen to me, quote unquote, any violent hate group. We already know that white supremacy may be white in terms of color, but sometimes we got some violent hate groups on our side too, fellas. I can go back to Boys in the Hood. When
Let
the boy
me
got
ask you
pulled
this.
over, right?
When we talk about that aspect of it, what do we need to do? Like Kiki will say, what do we need to do about these police unions that keep protecting these white supremacists?
Well, you know, I have to go back to the third point of the petition, which is to restrict federal funding to any law enforcement agency that violates the federal mandate prohibiting the hiring and retaining of police officers who are white supremacists. Now, unions, as we know, and I have to take my hat off because unions work on behalf of their constituencies, and right, and their constituency are police officers, right? I do believe there's a dualism between what unions do, and you know, and they can be partners in this. But if we take it out of the union and say we need a federal mandate that will identify and take swift and deliberate actions to prohibit white supremacy from being the culture-driven society in our police departments, then you can get a handle on this stuff. Because we can bring everybody at the table. I mean, there's room at the table, to your point, Donovan, because if you're not on the table, then you're on the menu. But guess what? Even if I'm on the menu, doesn't mean you got to eat me. It just means that I'm a topic of conversation. So how can I make that relevant? Right? There's room at the table. You know, you've heard this. You've heard the phrase, "It takes a village to raise a child." Everybody heard that. Everybody say that to District 9 trustee-elect Gary Mumma. You heard that. But there are two questions that people don't ask. There are two questions that people don't ask to the village concept. If it takes a village to raise a child, number one, who in the village, who trains the village? And number two, who in the village is invited to the training? So what I'm saying is that we have to change the culture of police and end systemic racism as well as retaliation. Because when you're supporting good cops and not bad cops, those bad cops on our website, and I put the website on the page. If you go to our website for Texas Cops and Community, we are focused on 4 core areas: advocacy, training, technical support, and police whistleblower. On that page, when you go to Texas Cops and Communities and go to services and click on police whistleblower, you're going to see about 50 police officers across this country that have been tore up from the floor up. Go ahead, Jerry. I'm sorry.
But we don't have to leave the city of Houston to see the whistleblower aspect of it. We look at the case of Kathy Swilley, who blew the whistle.
Sure
and when
did.
I say these people came after this later, highly decorated, never violated the law, and they destroyed her career. And they know that everything is fictitious. The mayor knows it. The current mayor knows it. The former mayor knew it. Nobody wants to do the right thing.
Well, you know, I see that question out there about. Let me just
determine. This is my question to you.
Go ahead.
Why is it so easy for white supremacists to infiltrate law enforcement?
That's a good question. And let me go back just one step and say that we have invited the Black politicians to join forces, not just Black, but white. We know sometimes we got to have a coalition of people to support petitionings like that. And that's what we've been doing aggressively. We don't want just to land in one ethnic group. We want everybody to know that there's power. But to his question about how did they become a predominant force? Well, Michael German is a special agent with a former special agent with the FBI, and he has been doing extensive research as to the growth of white supremacy. In fact, and I read this quote unquote, notably in 2006, the FBI warned that white supremacist infiltration in law enforcement represented then, I want y'all to know this, and to the viewers listening, in 2006, that white supremacists in law enforcement, infiltration, this is his words, infiltration in law enforcement represented then a significant national threat. And as we fast forward to 2020, Michael German, a former FBI special agent who has written extensively on the ways law enforcement agencies in the United States have failed to respond to the far-right domestic terror threats, conclude that law enforcement officials have been tied to racist militant activities in more than a dozen states since 2000. And hundreds of police officers have been caught posting racist and bigoted content on social media. Your question is, what's the best way to hide something?
Plain sight. Plain sight.
In plain sight. Donovan, you said the $50 million word. It's about culture. And
now,
if, and go ahead, Jerry.
We love to put people in the hot seat.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna ask you a tough question. How is it that a union can even go to bat for a Gerald Goins? Protect his man, provide him free legal services. I understand what they're supposed to do. But we can't get these cops out of here or do something about the problem if that police union is protecting dirty cops. And they know that they're dirty. Look at the case of Dennis Tuttle and the lady, I forgot her name at the moment, that were killed in the botch raid. Every last one of those cops should be getting the death penalty. But that union gonna go to bat.
Dennis Tuttles and Regina Nicholas.
Yeah. They're gonna go to bat for them.
Well, here's my response.
Even if you work with them, work with the unions or different things, you still have a conscience. We can't fix this unless we fix. Remember, you said at the beginning, we got to purge this thing. And one of the things we got to purge is the union protecting dirty cops.
Well, let me just add this. Another thing that you guys got to remember, how they infiltrate the police departments. Me being a military person, I always wondered why the military police department, the MPs, military police, or their security forces, they're full of all these guys from the South and stuff. And so let's say you're a regular civilian and you apply to the police department. What's one of the first things that they want to have on that application? Do you have any military experience? Do you have, they don't even worry about if you have a college education. They want to know, do you have a military experience and whatever. And what I noticed in my time in the military was I see all of these white people going into security forces, going into the military police. They do 4 to 6 years in the military, because I rarely saw friends do a whole military career as a policeman, because there's really no money when you're in the military. So they get out, and guess what? They are primed and ready to be on these police departments. And I found in my travels, a lot of my friends went right back to their hometowns where they're from and immediately got hired by that very police department. And, if that police department's racist and Mr. Jones is over there and, he fished with your dad, you got hired immediately. So they already.
You know what that is? Well, in the state of Texas, Governor Rick Perry signed the Chris Kyle bill, Senate Bill 162, which would allow military officers, and I'm going to read it to you. Senate Bill 162 has been called the Chris Kyle bill because it recognizes the achievement of service members with special operation training by allowing them credit towards state law enforcement licenses. So you take a recruitment class of cadets that would take, I would say, anywhere between 3 months to 5 months or so to complete the training required to build the culture that your department wants to see exuded out there as you patrol our streets and protect and defend the Constitution of America. But then you give military individuals, and whether the DD-214 is honorable, hopefully they check that out. But you give them 3 weeks because you've had special combat training. Again, urban warfare exemplified, right? Amplified. And so the infiltration comes in very much similar to that. You got police officers, as we said with Michael German, who's constantly posting. Let me tell you something. When I posted the link of the petition on some of these other blog sites, I had to turn off commenting because they were like, "You're a fool." And most of the folk that were saying it didn't look like me. And they're saying that because they're protecting themselves. But again, the best place to hide something is in plain sight. And so to your point and credit, if you fast track me into a law enforcement agency and I've just come out of Baghdad, how am I mentally prepared? And then guess what? Psych evaluations are done during recruitment. How about PTSD is real? How about the suicide rate for police officers? Remember, we support good cops, not bad cops. And the police officer that committed suicide after the National Capitol insurrection, after video and recording himself, testifying that, this is just too much. So we got a lot of things going on. And, it's one thing that I've oftentimes said, you can't offer the world the ocean if you don't give yourself a nimble of water first. And right now, our police agencies need to give themselves a nimble of water that helps them to identify, number one, if we were United Airlines or Southwest Airlines, we will never go online on any press conference and say, you know what, we got some good pilots and we got some bad pilots. Or worse, what they would say, well, 1% we already know 1% of our police officers may not be good. Would you get on that plane tomorrow, Jared? If your pilot said, what, sometime I land, sometime I don't. No. So we have to be, and I've said this to so many people, we can't change what we don't confront. We can't change what we don't confront. And it's time for us to confront the elephant. And when we confront the elephant, we ain't got to eat it all at one time. We do it one bite at a time. House Resolution 7120, I give you claps up. Duty to intervene, I give you claps up. No chokehold, ban and knee necks, subduing techniques, and minimizing ketamine and qualified immunity. All those things are great. But if your house is divided, and this is biblical, Jerry, a house on the sand can't stand. And what we're saying, we cannot let this rest in the hands of local law enforcement agencies. We have to take this up at the level, just like when they did unified crime reporting, just like when they were ending racial profiling. We have to make sure that we send a strong message and not stand behind the days. Because let me tell you something, what the petition is really about. The petition is about the souls of these people who have died. And they can't scream from the podium for justice because they're dead. And we have to be their voices.
You can't scream for justice when the system wasn't designed to give it to us in the first place. The justice, when you think about police in general and how it originated, how policing originated, the things that they've been taught to do throughout time. That's why I'm like, can you really go after some of these people when you're teaching them to do this? Yeah, I know when you kneel on George's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the mayor would be appalled. No, you're appalled because your ass got caught. You've been doing it. It's been documented. You've been doing it. You just happen to get caught this time. So now that they done got caught, it's like, oh, we didn't know it was this bad, and you on the inside. And I always tell politicians and public officials, it's your job to know. Nobody gives a damn about you lying right now. Because we got to do something about this, because you're going to have some LA riots on your hand, and we already know when the black folk click up, they ain't got a shot in hell.
Sharpton had 18 prior complaints, man.
Yeah.
George Floyd. 18 prior complaints, my brother.
And I mentioned that months ago. How does he still have a job after 3? A motherfucker working Walmart, you get 3 write-ups, you out the door, you ain't the door greeter no more. But in the police force, you kill 18 motherfuckers and still be working.
Well, here's a really good question that I want to know. Okay, you got the platform, you've got the some of the answers to solving the problems, who would be against what you're advocating? Because I know the bill is very hard, even to introduce a bill, because a lot of people think, well, even though Biden took $15 out of the bill, they'll just let it stand on its own. It won't make it. Do you know how hard it is to put a bill on the floor? Okay, it ain't gonna make it. Okay, it's done. So in your situation, I mean, we all want safety. We all want good cops, black, white, Asian, whatever. I don't care. We all want that subliminally. Who would be against what you're proposing and what your organization is trying to do?
The status quo, Donovan. Let me tell you something about comfort. Comfort enters your home as a guest, remains as your host, and becomes your master. And there's been a lot of people who are just comfortable with the status quo. And I'm not sublime, nor am I ignorant to even conceive the notion that there are some good-willed black people, brown people, yellow people, red people out there in this world. But when comfort erodes the very culture that you're trying to build at the entry door to America's justice system, then you either have to proverbially eat or get out the pot. And so there are going to be natural opposition because, when people say people don't like change, but a wet baby, that ain't a damn lie. Try wearing the same underwear every day. Okay? You're not going to do that. People inherently like change. People don't resist change. People resist being changed in some changes. So what we're doing and what we're advocating is a change in culture, and that will ordinarily bring natural apprehension. Jerry, I apologize.
No, you're fine. Donovan, I want to provide an answer for what you said. The people that would be against it, and this is my perspective, not you guys's, are the police union that protect the road cops. It's the white folks that's entitled that don't deal with law enforcement in the way that we deal with it. You see what I'm saying? They don't see what we see. They don't go through what we go through. So why should we change it for them? This is how you guys think out there now. Got some good white people that watch this show. Got love for you. But some of y'all don't go through the shit that we go through. So therefore, you are against changing the system. And when he said status quo, that's what I got from it. You know what I'm saying? And if you offended, I don't give a damn. I'm just telling the truth. I'm just telling the truth. What we go through in the black community dealing with these road cops, you do not go through it. That's why it's so easy for you to say, no, it doesn't need to be changed. There's nothing wrong with it. No, there's nothing wrong with it in your community. There's something wrong with it in ours.
And I go back to what I said earlier, man. Privilege is when you think something is not a problem because it's not a problem to you personally. And that's a quote from Dr. Seuss, David Gator. That's Dr. Seuss. Privilege is when you think something is not a problem because it's not a problem to you personally. And when you are disconnected from that, see, it's called sensitivity. And we've been desensitized. There's so many people anonymous around all of us. It's crazy. Anonymity is a killer, brother. And you're right, Jared. When you're not sensitive to what that feels like, or, if police officers, again, I'm going to go back. We support good cops, not bad cops. If a police officer would treat everyone that they encounter like their grandmother, it'll cure everything in this world.
Well, how do you figure out who the good cops are? To me, you're not a good cop if you rocking with a bad one and know they doing something wrong and you don't turn them in.
Well, because let me tell you the story on that. Duty to intervene is something that I personally wrote as president and CEO of Texas Cops and Communities to our local task team that was formed by the mayor. And one of the things that I did see part of the reform for Houston was that they had the duty to intervene. There are so many police officers, gentlemen, and I can go to gamut. If you can't take the page, and I'm trying to get there now, I can go to gamut that we're police officers who have, again, remember, our goal is to end systemic racism in law enforcement as well as retaliation. So when you got police officers who are good, I watched Training Day yesterday. Okay. And I watched it from start to finish. And I told my wife, I said, this is a good vintage movie right here. But it's ironic that you was asked that question. But in Training Day, we already knew what happened. DW was a monster. And his partner was innocent. He was like, I want to save the world. And if it were not for him in this movie, remember, life imitate art imitate life, right? Reciprocally speaking, right? If it were not for him in saving that little girl's life, he would have been dead. So we have to have tools in place, and I'm saying you don't use implement one without the other. I say put it all, throw everything at it. Here's what I know about the law of requisite variety: that the size of the solution has to meet the size of the problem. Do we want to go an inch deep and a mile wide in this House Resolution 7120, or do we want to go a mile deep and an inch wide, where we start addressing the root of the issues? And we know that a significant number of issues that is tearing up the culture in police departments across this country, whether you are in Oakland, California, Buffalo, New York, or out there in Utah, is that we have white supremacist infiltration, as Michael German has reported on since 2006. And this infiltration is a threat to national security.
Final thoughts, Mr. Donovan.
I have learned a lot. I thought I knew enough, but I mean, I've learned a lot just sitting in here and doing that. And you're bringing another component that we need to think about in regards to reforming the police. I mean, recruiting, mental background checks and all this other stuff, the military connection. I mean, this is like almost like a super wide conspiracy. And I'm glad you keep bringing and highlighting that. And I put your page up. And for those of you guys, please go out there and sign the petition. I strongly recommend that, because in a democracy, numbers count and politicians only move based on numbers. You can't go to a politician and say, well, I got this problem, and me and my 4 members of my family, they're going to look at you and say, get the hell out of here. But if you go in there and you say, I got this problem, and I got 100,000 people behind me, they are moved to action. And before I go real quick,
we're looking for about 5,000 in 30 days. If we can get 5,000 in 30 days, we can move the black politician, the white politician. We need all politicians on this to action. And in fact, we're having a press conference here locally. You won't be here, Jerry, but we'll pray that pilot that you get can land and take off safely on Thursday, March the 11th, at the Shape Community Center over there with Deloitte Parker, the godfather of civil rights. And our message to the community on that day between 10 to 11 is that we need to change the culture of policing, and that we're complementing the efforts of all what our legislative bodies and lawmakers have done, state and federal. We don't want anybody to feel isolated. We don't want anybody to feel like their work doesn't matter. But guess what? When mama made the gumbo and she said, baby, I just got this one secret. And, and it's something that makes everybody feet curl and go to sleep after Thanksgiving or during Christmas. We got this one ingredient, my brothers, right? And my sisters who listening, that will add the necessary spice to the gumbo that will bring civility back to policing and eliminate brutality, at least reduce it significantly, and lethality to a degree in which I live by this very fundamental principle, gentlemen. We can live 40 days without food. We can live about 4 days without water. We can live about 4 minutes without air, but we can't live 1 second without hope. And hope, in my definition, is helping other people prosper every day. And when we end white supremacy, as Michael German has said in literature after literature for over 20 years, we can begin to change the culture of policing everywhere.
I tell you what, I'm going to close it out, man. I want to thank our guest, Noel Pinnock, for coming on. You definitely need to come back, brother. We're going to bring you back for sure. And
Hey, man,
especially
real,
in the middle of legislative season. And if you have a day where you're going down to the Capitol, you gotta come on, let us know. And you may be able to fill up a bus, man, because we got to do something about this. I thank all of you guys that donated tonight. I appreciate it. We do this every Tuesday, $2 Tuesdays. You can donate $2 or you can donate whatever you want. So I appreciate it. It's gonna go to a good cause, the run for school board. And as you can see, we need some help in Houston and surrounding areas when it comes to education. So with that being said, man, I want to thank y'all for taking the time out to come in here and hang out with us.
Thank you, guys.
And we the best
We
in
got
the
work to do.
My man, on behalf of my man Donovan Sadiq, our special guest Noel Pinnock, I'm the 5-star general, and I'll holler at y'all, bro.
Peace of Christ.